a geek. Talking baseball every week. 'Cause they're Gleeman and a geek.
And welcome to Gleeman and the Geek, presented by Black Stack Brewing. Now in a store near you, I'm John Bonus of Trinity Daily. With me, Aaron Gleeman of The Athletic, and our live studio audience.
Who's sleeping?
Sleeping under your feet, by the way. Yeah, she's already.
The dog whisperer. As all of our Patreon subscribers already know from the last episode, because boy, did she make an entrance. John has a new dog named Rosalita, and you just got her 3 days ago, right?
Yeah, Tuesday night.
And we recorded an episode Wednesday. And she was very well behaved during it, but then in the middle, right around the time we mentioned the name Phil Miller, she walked over to your kitchen. We were recording in your living room, which is right next to the kitchen. She walked over to the kitchen and just peed on the floor. And
she's a very young puppy.
Yeah, she's a puppy. She doesn't know what she's doing. But now, 2 days later, she is fast asleep by my feet, basically, under my feet.
Yes.
Which is how I prefer to record podcasts. Because for many years,
that's right.
R.I.P. to Shar, one of the great dogs of all time, she would always just sleep through every podcast, basically.
And so you guys all know that Aaron has 2 cats.
Yeah.
But he grew up with dogs.
Yeah. I just like all animals. I don't like people. I like animals, which I know is like the number one sign of being a sociopath, which I'm fine with. But I love, even Chrissy apparently texted Becky Wednesday and said, Aaron's meeting the dog. He's doing the cute little voices, and because anytime I behave like a human, the two of them think it's so funny, or the three of you think it's so funny. But I love dogs. I love dogs. I love cats. Humans, I could take or leave.
You talked about taking Rosa home with you, and yesterday I had an experience with Rosa where I thought to myself, this would be Aaron Gleeman's nightmare. We went for a run yesterday with Rosa.
We've already started out with something I don't want to do. So you're on the right track.
That's right.
You can stop there.
And she likes to run. She's very active. But the things that she likes most of all in this world are meeting people and meeting other dogs. And so when we go, if the other person is like walking the other direction, we've got a chance of getting her past them without stopping dead. Right. But if the other person is just standing there, like on the street corner waiting for a bus or something, she will just stop dead, because there's no way that person does not want to stop and pet her.
Yeah, well, she's right.
She is convinced. By the way, she does have cuteness in abundance.
So she's like you without the cuteness, but you in dog form. But here's what I'll say: like my building that I live in. It's like all
ours is too.
We're like one of the youngest couples, so it's like all 50, 60, 70-year-old people. It's great dogs, just tons of dogs. Got to be, I don't know, average of 2 dogs per unit in the building. Like there's just so many, and I know all the dogs. And I'll get in the elevator and I'll be like, "Hey, buddy, good to see you again." And the owner will just be like, "Who are you?" Because I'll not. I don't even interact with the people.
Hey, Harley, good to meet you.
Right, I know all their names. I know. Hey, buddy.
Hey, Truman.
Yeah, and then there's some lady holding a leash, and I'm like, "Oh, hey, hi."
Skittles.
Yeah. I don't even. Well, and then we identify all of our neighbors by the dog, so we'll be like, Becky will come back from like the garage or whatever, and she'll be like, "Oh, I ran into the lady with the St. Charles." And it's like we don't know what her name is, we don't know what unit she lives in.
Right, that's right.
But the dog's cute.
If you ever had to take this dog for a walk, you would have to be so social.
Yeah, it's bad.
It would drive you insane. Yeah, absolutely insane.
Even when I had a dog, 20 years ago, 15, 20 years ago, Boston Terrier, and I lived I lived with my mom in a townhouse. I was a kid. Right. And we didn't have a fenced in, so you'd have to take her around the little townhouse neighborhood. Right. And even that, and I was young then at that point. I hadn't turned into full Larry David mode yet. I was just young Larry David. And even that, I was like, I'd give her pep talks. I'd be like, let's stick to peeing and not have to go across the street and say hi to the neighbors.
This was me yesterday I'm trying to meet somebody for lunch, or being in front of at a food truck, and I'm trying to get her there in time. And she's like, the only thing she likes more than people is other dogs. And so, crossing the street with the light changing is another dog, and she stops dead in the middle of the crossroad. Like, I know the cars are coming, but I've got to say hello to
Fluffy. I think, karma because now you know how I feel going places with you. That's how you behave.
This is what I thought. I thought, on the one hand, this dog could not be better for me, but on the other hand, it could also not be worse for Aaron Gleeman.
Think of all the times we go to a brewery or something and people come up to John. John knows everyone there. And I'm like, can we just sit in a corner and have this beer? And John's like, no, this guy, I was at his wedding a week ago. And this guy, I know his sister. And well, this is
or Dan Hayes.
This is what
you
get.
And Dan Hayes, or you and me. That's it. Yeah, that's it.
So yeah, this is our first free show with Rosa. She is fast asleep. We'll see whether or not she pees again. I'm hoping that doesn't become like a Cal Ripken streak.
Yeah,
she does that on every.
You're hoping it's my condo, right?
We have a decent amount to talk about. So
a lot has happened since last
Twins had yesterday off after losing 2 out of 3 in Tampa to the Rays in their minor league park, which was a very odd viewing experience, I thought. Didn't seem to be real fun. It was like 100 degrees, essentially. Yeah. Audra had her like handheld thermometer, and she because she brings that, I guess. I don't know why. And she put it on the railing of the dugout. Where, you know how like guys will stand on the top step of the dugout and kind of lean over?
Yeah,
and that's usually like some type of plastic or like it's like padded usually.
Yeah, right.
Well, this one, it was 161 degrees, which that'll burn you, I'm pretty sure. And so that was the situation. They lose 2 out of 3.
That's at night. Or was that the day game?
It might have been the day
Maybe
game.
Probably the day game.
Okay, good. I mean, it was still 95 at night.
Sure,
too.
right.
The pitchers were changing uniform tops every like inning or two. Some of them do that already. But so we already talked about the first 2 games of the series on Wednesday's Patreon, Patreon, patreon.com/Gleeman if you want that. We'll talk a little bit about this series. But the last game of the series was the fear with this team, right? Which is they just can't hit.
Yeah, right.
And I'm not going to say that the pitching was phenomenal or something like that, obviously, but there's been too many games this season where it's like the pitching either gets wasted. In other words, they give up like 2 or 3 runs and you go, well, that's enough to win from the pitching staff. And the offense scores 1 or 2 runs. But there's also been games where the offense will just score 0 or 1 run, like we saw, and it doesn't matter what the pitching does. And some of those, the pitching doesn't do their part. Some of those, the pitching does their part. That's the fear with this team. Now, fortunately, and we're going to talk a lot about this, this hasn't been made official, so we're speculating here, but it certainly seems like they resume play tonight, I think 9 o'clock Central Time in Seattle.
Right.
I believe, my assumption is that one or both of Byron Buxton and Matt Wallner will be activated and presumably in the starting lineup against a right-handed pitcher.
Yeah, I mean, it certainly appears that way given the fact that they DFA'd or not DFA, optioned McCusker down.
Which we predicted they would do that during the off day because they want to save a day of service time and money instead of doing it today.
You know what this stretch reminds me of, before we kind of jump ahead to looking ahead on this? It reminds me of early August last year where we were taking a look at, they were doing well. They were 17 games above 500, right? But we were saying, this offense, it feels like they're kind of relying on smoke and mirrors to kind of win some of these games. Like the offense is holding up, but boy, if anything goes wrong, you could see this offense really struggling for the next, for the rest of this season. I think the things that went wrong in that case was, the main trigger was the blowing the save in Texas, right? But also, losing Joe Ryan out of the rotation. So you suddenly had one less reliable, super reliable arm in the rotation and so on. They took 2 out of 3 versus Kansas City by scoring 9 runs over 3 games. That's an average of 3 runs a game. That's not great. And then they lost 2 out of 3 versus Tampa. They won 1 out of 3, I should say, versus Tampa by scoring 6 runs over 3 games, which is 2 runs per game.
No, those are both good pitching stats, but yeah, I mean, it's
so they averaged 2.5 runs per game over this last week, and somehow ended up 3-3.
Well, I'll say this: they're 4-5 since the winning streak ended.
Right.
And during those 9 games, they've averaged 2.7 runs per game.
Right.
So
that's as good as you can hope to do when you're averaging 2.7 runs per game.
And we talked about the danger of that, which on the last Patreon, there's 2. One is it presumes a level of pitching excellence that they have, for the most part, provided so far, but will be very difficult to maintain for another 100 plus games.
Sure, right.
I mean, that is
That's
asking
right.
a lot.
Right.
And it also puts pressure on the starters, but more so the relievers, to not only maintain that excellence, but also to be specifically with the bullpen, possibly be overused because you never get a big enough lead to go to your...
You're overusing your best arms that
Yes.
way. Right. Exactly right.
And it also puts in a position where, a bloop and a blast ruins the game, which you don't... That kind of high wire act or that high pressure environment...
Yep.
You don't want to have a guy make 65 out of 75 appearances in that environment.
Yeah.
You want to give some guys some spots where they got a little leeway, and that's the fear. Now
that's kind of what happened to Pablo a little bit in the game 3. The bloop gave up a blast.
Right.
Now we're down 1-0, bloop and a blast. 2-0.
Well, and it also creates situations where, especially starting pitchers, get criticized. Like that start is a good example.
Yeah, right.
Where if the offense scores 5 runs instead of 2 runs or whatever they scored, you look at that start and you go,
0 runs.
Yeah. Well, you look at that start and you go, hey, he kept him in the game.
Right.
But you can only say they kept him in the game cliche if the other half of the team is doing any sort of reasonable job. So that has been a struggle all season. It was, like you said, a struggle the final 40 games of last season too.
Yeah.
But
we saw hints of it kind of like now, like 2 weeks before that, 3 weeks before that, we were taking a look and going, this offense.
Well, also, they were without Correa the entire time.
Well, that's true too. That's right.
But now, if we presume that no one got hurt on the flight to Seattle, which is, I don't want to, knock on wood if you need to there. This is also assuming they activate Buxton and Wallner for this Mariners series and no one else gets immediately injured. This is the first time all season, and really probably the first time even since like the middle of last season, where they've had their entire planned opening day lineup, or even beyond that, like their 10 or 11 core hitting group, because Lewis got hurt in spring training and then missed the first month. And then by the time he came back, Wallner was out.
Yes.
And, Correa's missed time, Castro's missed time, Buxton's missed time. I'm probably forgetting a guy or two. They also have sent guys down who were, although I don't know that Miranda and Julian, without the injuries coming out of camp, would have been part of that group anyway. But I guess what I'm saying, not so much that I think, adding Wallner and Buxton is going to fix this thing, or they'll go from being, I think right now they're 23rd out of 30 in runs per game and OPS and stuff.
Sounds about right.
That alone is not going to raise them from 23rd to 13th or something like that.
Yep.
But it does, I do feel like it's an opportunity to at least evaluate what they wanted to be evaluated on. In other words, this is the group that they put together that they thought would be a good enough offense to support a good pitching staff. And we just haven't seen it. Now, it's also fair to note that given either individually with specific players or collectively, this is also not a group that can be counted on to stay intact from a health standpoint.
Sure.
And so this might be a very brief window.
You're right.
2 innings. Who knows what it'll be? Somebody will trip and fall coming off the tarmac or something in Seattle. But at least it at least provides something to evaluate that isn't filled with Deshaun Kersey and Mickey Gasper and,
Jonah Bride, maybe.
Jonah Bride. And I don't mean to be mean to these guys.
Right.
Some of them done an okay
Cody
job.
Clemens
Cody Clemens has really stepped up.
MVP, basically, right?
Yeah, and so now not only do you have your intended, let's say, 10 guys, if we're including Castro, that you wanted to start the season with as a lineup, like what you thought of as your offense at that point, but now you've added Clemens to the mix, who wasn't even on the Twins coming out of spring training.
Right.
And, we'll see what happens with him in terms of turning back into a pumpkin, or is this a true breakout or whatever it is. But he is more depth now, and I think they'll still continue to use him. I mean, there's certainly opportunities to continue to use him as a left-handed bat against right-handed pitching, especially. So I don't think he's going to go to the bench just because they have some guys healthy. But you don't want to be relying on Cody Clemens to be, a 1,000 OPS guy. What if he's a 750 OPS guy, and then he can just be a nice, role player for you?
Right.
That's the benefit, I think, to getting these guys back. So now that you have,
or the strong side of a platoon guy.
right,
yeah,
exactly.
Right.
So now that you have Buxton and Wallner, and honestly, those are, I would say, 2 of the Twins' 3 best hitters on paper.
Yeah, for sure.
Buxton, to me, was the first quarter MVP before his concussion. And Wallner, for the 18 games he played in the leadoff spot mostly before he got hurt, was the best hitter on the team that had no good hitters other than him, basically, in early and mid-April. So getting those two guys back also beefs up the outfield in general, where they've been playing some guys who probably don't need to be playing that much. And also Harrison Bader's a little bit banged up, so that helps in that regard. But it just adds two.
It also adds two of the top three bats, towards the top of the lineup. It kind of pushes a lot of the guys who have been adding 1 through 3 or 1 through 4 back to the middle of the lineup where they belong.
Now, the downside is if you add Wallner and Buxton to this group, and they do for the most part stay intact health wise for the next, let's say, 3 weeks, and they continue to not really produce offensively, there's no more lever to push or pull at that point. Like, there's no more card to play at that point. You've got everyone back. I do think, though, first of all, there's always questions when guys are coming back off the IL, and Wallner missed a month and a half, and Buxton is going to end up missing about only 2 weeks. However, he's dealing with a concussion, which we've seen that before with, unfortunately, a lot of good Twins players where you don't know what you're getting when a guy comes back from a health standpoint, from a performance standpoint. So we'll see. But, I think Buxton has been so key to them in terms of being just like a jump starter for this offense. Wallner, you might be able to make the case that he's just their best hitter at this point. I mean, certainly from an OPS standpoint over the last 3 years, he's the best hitter on the team.
Well, and even especially in April, where we did see him, and he was carrying that
now,
lineup.
He missed 6 weeks, which is a lot.
Yeah.
And he's in the past shown a tendency to, he's slump prone, or if he's off track from a mechanical standpoint.
Yeah, right.
Now, he's mostly been hot, but he also played a pretty lengthy rehab assignment.
Yeah.
I know lengthier than a lot of Twins fans would have liked to see, especially given how he performed. So he last night homered again for the Saints, which means he has 5 homers in 6 rehab games for the Saints. He also had a bunch of other hits too. He hit 300, 350 or something. He seems pretty locked in at the plate. Obviously, they've been on the road trip, so I haven't been able to talk to anybody. But when he came for the second to last game of the homestand, and just was in the clubhouse saying hi to everybody. He had the day off with the Saints and all that.
Yeah.
And he seemed, even then, which is now almost a week ago.
Yeah. That was Saturday. Yeah.
Very optimistic physically. Like, he basically said, I'm fine. Like, my injured hamstring feels better than the healthy hamstring at this point, because they've been working on it so much. So you add that to the fact that Correa has looked pretty good here the week or so before the concussion, and the week or so coming back from the concussion. He's certainly trending in the right direction. We mentioned Cody Clemens, who's provided a real jolt for them. They've had some other guys, Jeffers, let's say, is performing pretty well, but there's a lot of guys who they're going to need to step up, but I think it provides more of a realistic kind of environment for, the Brooks Lees and the Larnacks and the, whoever, Willie Castro's, let's say, to step up when they're not being counted on to bat
when they don't
second
have
or fourth.
When all the weight of producing offensively isn't on the shoulders of those guys.
Well, and plus, when I say Brooks Lee,
they can be regular contributors as opposed to
And when you say Brooks Lee and Willie Castro and whoever needs to step up, we're not talking about them going on a Clemens style run here.
Right.
We're talking about a 95 to 105 OPS plus, be an average hitter, plus or minus a couple of points, and that doesn't help you that much when they're your third best hitter. But when they're your seventh best hitter, if you can get average production from the bottom third of the lineup, let's say, and the top of the lineup with Wallner and Correa and Buxton, and obviously Royce Lewis is the one. I wrote about him yesterday. Yeah. We talked about him quite a bit on the Patreon, but that's the biggest sort of point of inflection, is like, what version of Royce Lewis are they getting?
Certainly you've got an enormous amount of potential upside.
Right. But as I wrote yesterday, he's played 61 games since middle of last August, and he's hit 178 with like 2 homers during that time. And this year he's batting 138. And I know people will point to, and I'm willing to point to, he had a homer robbed in Milwaukee. He had like 2 or 3 hits robbed in Tampa. Sure. He's certainly he hasn't gotten lucky. But you also look at like the expected numbers during that 60 games going back to last August, and he's expected batting average of 220, expected slugging of like 395 or something. That's better than his actual numbers. Sure. So there is some bad luck in there, and you can just
It's less dismal, is what it is.
Yes, but it's still pretty
Right.
discouraging as a big picture view. And so, you get Wallner back, you get Buxton back. If Correa's on track, that has the makings. And if some of these role players step up, like we've been talking about, that has the makings of a good lineup. But can they be a great lineup? Or I don't think they can be a great lineup. Can they be an above average, consistently above average lineup? Ranking.
I'll take average.
Yeah, okay. Rank 15th out of 30 instead of 23rd out of 30.
That's right.
Without Royce Lewis looking more like the first 100-something games of his career versus the last 60-something games of his career. And that's the biggest spectrum of potential results in any player they have. Yeah. The version we've seen is not a major league caliber hitter. The version we used to see was, one of the top 10 hitters in the league. Right. I'm not expecting him to get back to that because I think even without
we expected some regression to the mean to begin with, right?
He was on another level at that point. But finding some common ground where you can be a 115, 120 OPS type of guy, you can bat fifth in that lineup, let's say something like that. You can be a 25 homer guy. You can take some better quality of at bats, all that stuff. That has a chance, even though he's been back now for a little while, that has a chance to be as big or bigger of an impact as Wallner and Buxton coming back, just as Correa being back on track has a chance to be as big of an impact as anyone coming back, because the version of Correa we saw early in the season was so far off the norm for him that even getting back to his norm is a massive difference, or a massive difference for a lineup.
I'm taking a look at Royce Lewis's career numbers. Yeah, career like this, so it includes all the good stuff and the most dismal, 60 games or something. And we've got basically his career OPS right now is 782 or a 115 OPS plus. Yeah, if we can just kind of get that
right.
going
but the
forward,
thing is, it's like we talked about with the Twins record right now. Yeah. The Twins are 30-25. Right. That's an 88 win pace. At no point this season have they looked like an 88 win team. Right. They've either looked like a 50 win team early, or a 110 win team over the last month. Right. Same thing with Royce Lewis. Yeah. At no point has Royce Lewis looked like a 115 OPS plus guy. He's either looked like a 175 OPS guy, which is like an MVP candidate, or the version we've seen of late, which is like almost unplayable. So yes, getting back to that would be fine, just as the Twins, winning 88 games would be fine this season. But he has to prove, and they have to prove, and the lineup in general has to prove that they are capable of averageness. They are capable of sustained competency. That's not amazing. It's not horrible. It's just averageness because, first of all, averageness from Royce Lewis is still pretty good.
Yes, right.
Based on those career numbers that you just cited. Second of all, average-ish from the lineup, along with a top 5 pitching staff, is going to win a lot of games, and that turns into average-ish 88 win pace, which they're at right now. That's above average, but that'll get you into the playoffs, and it'll probably get you the number 1 wild card. Which is home field advantage. So the appeal of averageness has never been more apparent to me than with the Twins. And I don't mean they have to just be average for the rest of the season. I just mean show from a lineup standpoint and a team standpoint that you're capable of just solid play. Right. And that can be enough, even if it's just for the next 3 or 4 weeks, basically. Yeah. And that's what I want to see now that the lineup is largely intact.
We've gotten a little bit of a taste of that over the last week, but even then, or last 10, 11 days since the streak ended, but even then, what we saw was a lineup that is anything but average, and a rotation and pitching staff that is way above average. Okay, but before we go on to the next thing, let's talk about another group that is nothing but average, nothing like average.
Well above average.
Well above average. Well, I'd actually say they also had a period where there was some dismalness. That was with their distribution prior to the last 3, 4, 5 months. I'm talking about our presenting sponsor, Black Stack Brewing. Black Stack Brewing has always been known for their excellent beer and their excellent tap room. They're the brewery that people want to collaborate with because these guys know what they are doing, and you can see it, especially in sort of their IPAs. If you go check out their brewery, they're well known for their IPAs, but I would also just tell you to check out their Slopes French Pilsner, their Pull Tab Pale Ale. They've also got a strawberry rhubarb sour that's awesome. What was dismal about them was that their distribution in the past was real bad. But now they've got a brand new distributor. And what that means is that you don't have to go to a specialty beer store or a specialty liquor store anymore to get your hands on Black Stack Brewing. You can just go to your local liquor store all over Minnesota, whether it's Grand Marais to Rochester, Winona to Fargo, all over. You're going to be able to find their stuff. look for sort of I think most of their cans are sort of silver around the edge, and then they've got some very cool graphics in there. Just ask for them at your local liquor store. You're going to be able to find them. You're going to love them. They're going to be your new summer beer. They're going to be the ones that you want to bring to parties, and that you're going to kind of want to guard a little bit in the cooler, because you're not going to want to share too many of them. Especially, like I said, I just love the IPA and the French Slopes French Pilsner. So, give yourself a treat. Check out Black Stack Brewing, either by stopping by Black Stack Brewing, their tap room at 94 and 280, or even easier, ask for them at your local liquor store.
Okay, so just to finish up on Buxton and Wallner, like we said, we think they're coming back tonight. We don't know. It's 10 hours until game time.
What we do know is that they've got an open roster spot for an outfielder.
Yeah, so they send down McCusker, which we predicted on the last show. I don't know. I don't know what to make of McCusker's week and a half in the majors. He got 5 plate appearances,
right?
Basically,
yeah.
He got 2 starts, but he was removed in the middle of game of both starts. Yeah. He got a couple of pinch hit appearances, which okay. I'm glad he blooped in a single, so he can say he had a major league hit. That's nice.
Yeah.
Guys like Ryan Fitzgerald didn't get to do that before he got sent back down. But I didn't have super high hopes for how they would use McCusker. And I don't mean his performance. I just mean like the actual window of opportunity for him. And in fact, I got a little heat a week and a half ago when they called him up, and I said, like, I'm very skeptical that they're going to use him. And people were like, well, why would they call him up and not use him? And I was like, well, that's an excellent question, but that's not for me to answer.
Because they've got not a lot of options right now. Yeah, right.
But that is indeed what happened. He made one early misplay in right field, which I'm sure didn't go over really well. But there were opportunities to play him at DH potentially in there. I mean, certainly they faced a lefty 3 times. He only started 2 of those games. He was removed in like the 4th inning of both of them. Yep. I mean, I would say they went out of their way.
Once where there was still a lefty on the mound.
Right. I mean, and it was for Deshaun Kersey defense. I mean, they went out of their way not to give him an opportunity. Now, it turns out that Buxton hopefully will be back within about 2 weeks, and Wallner alongside him. So there wasn't going to be a tremendous runway for McCusker anyway, but there was certainly an
2 weeks
opportunity.
From when he was called up, right? Yes. Right.
There was certainly an opportunity for him to get 30 at bats instead of 5 at bats. And given the way their lineup is, all of the potential reasons for why they didn't want to play him kind of fall on my deaf ears, because it's like, why is he being held to this level of skepticism that all these other guys who are hitting horribly are not being held to? And I don't mean like Royce Lewis, but I just mean like Jonah Bride and Kersey and some of these other role players. They're not hitting either. It's almost as if they're so scared of McCusker being as bad as those other guys that they didn't even want McCusker to get an opportunity. I think obviously McCusker earned the call up in the sense that he was great for 40 games at AAA, but I think I always tried to paint a skeptical tone in terms of what I thought they would actually give him as an opportunity, because they weren't going to call him up if the outfield depth hadn't been wiped out.
Sure.
And so the fact that it took Wallner being out and Buxton then being out for them to turn to the guy with
and not really having a DH to begin with.
Right. But they still, I don't think they would have called him up. So the fact that it took that to call him up made me think they weren't really planning on this. Now, they could have chosen someone else, I guess, if they just thought it was going to be 5 plate appearances over 2 weeks or whatever. But I'm not trying to say like they don't like Carson McCusker, but it's a bummer that he didn't get an opportunity, but I'm not shocked by it, because I kind of thought their handling of him suggested that. And look, I mean, he's 27. He was signed out of independent ball. He's a high strikeout hitter.
He was not invited to spring training this year. He was not one of the major league players in spring training camp. So that's where that's kind of where he ranked in terms of sort of what they thought his plans were for 2025.
Right. Now, I would say, he's on the 40-man roster, but I don't know that I see really much opportunity for him going forward either, because I guess if he continues to hit 350 with a 1200 OPS all season, that would maybe change some things. But he's not going to perform any better than he has for the Saints. He could perform longer like that and maybe change their mind. But being on the 40-man roster is a leg up. It means that they only have so many candidates to call up and send down and stuff. We've seen that before. Guys who are on the 40-man roster get preference even if their performance doesn't really warrant it. So that's in his favor. if they weren't going to play him now over the last couple of weeks with their outfield depth decimated and the lineup really struggling, I think that tells you a lot.
Right.
Like, and maybe it's just they weren't comfortable with him. Maybe they just wanted him as a warm body, all that stuff. And like I said, it's nice that he got some service time. He got a little money. He got a first hit. That's all great. I mean, I'm sure that's more than he ever envisioned when he signed with them a couple years ago for nothing out of the independent ball.
Right.
But yeah, and I get why they're skeptical. I'm not. It's funny in a situation like this where it's like he becomes like my guy. I ranked him 38th out of 40 prospects coming into the season. Like, I think he is a coin flip to be like a decent role player. And so, yeah, I'm not stumping for him to, get signed to a $100 million extension or something. I just think given the state of their offense, see if he can run into a few. And they just never really give him the opportunity to do that. And I hesitate to even say he didn't take advantage. He got 4 at bats or whatever it was. So, but yeah, just I don't know, a little bit of a little underwhelming, but also not totally unexpected. And the only thing he can do now is just continue to play well for the Saints. And this is weird, but hope a bunch of injuries happen. Well, because he's certainly not going to get handed an opportunity. That much is clear.
Let me ask you this: so, in terms of his path to the majors, let's start with the assumption that he continues to hit well, maybe not as insanely well as he has done at AAA St. Paul right now. How safe is his spot on that 40-man roster?
Well, then why would you put him on it if you didn't plan to keep him on it for a while?
Right. I mean, because you had to call him up,
But they didn't.
Yeah, but they didn't. Right. I mean, they didn't have to call him up, but they didn't.
I mean, the dumbest possible thing for them, even in my mind, a bigger mistake than having him collect dust for 2 weeks.
Right. Would be dropping him off
put him on the 40 roster and then
expose him
DFA
to
him.
everybody. Right.
You have him for 3 more years where you wouldn't have to do anything with him, just in the minors. So
I mean, that is.
I don't think they're going to do that. That would be idiotic to do that.
Right.
Whether or not you believe in McCusker at all, just from a roster functionality standpoint.
So it feels to me like his more likely introduction to really getting a shot in the majors isn't in the near term. It's more like, okay, he's on the 40-man roster for now. He's going to be keeping on the 40-man roster. Maybe next year something is, he's in spring training camp and he's got.
I'd be very surprised by that. I mean, look, he's destroying AAA and their offense stinks and they were banged up and they were playing a bunch of other AAA guys who aren't as good as him or haven't been as good as him in AAA. If you can't get some run there, I mean, he's waiting for 5 injuries to happen, I guess, which I'm not putting that out of the realm of possibility.
You're right. Yes. Our Septembers have been Septembers to remember around here.
Whatever. I mean, that could be his opportunity. So yeah, just a little disappointing. But again, I was pretty skeptical. They are often pretty easy to read, especially with like role players and AAA guys and stuff like that, on who they like and who they don't. And I'm trying not to use this wording because they have nothing against Carson McCusker, like personally.
Seemingly, right.
I mean, they signed him. They like him more than the other 29 teams. They signed him out of independent.
But there's liking and then there's believing in. And the question is really sort of like.
It seems clear they do not believe in him.
Or the aspects of his game. Maybe it's defensive. Maybe it's something else that maybe it's,
Yeah. It's not that I believe in those that much. I mean, like I said, I think those are valid reasons to be skeptical. But what does it really cost you as a bad lineup with a bunch of quad A guys playing to give him 5 starts over 8 games or 9 games or something and just see like maybe he can hit a homer or 2. But yeah, for whatever reason, they didn't do that. So he gets sent down. I think he will make room for Buxton. I mean, it's not going to matter if they both return. It's the same. But they'll have to send down a second guy for Wallner if both Buxton and Wallner return tonight. My assumption, it almost would have to be either Bride or Kersey.
Right.
Those are really your only choices. Cody Clemens is not getting sent down.
No.
Cody Clemens might be like elevated to sainthood before he gets sent to the Saints.
Unless somebody else on the roster is waiting to be put on the IL until the lineup gets healthy or something like that. Yeah, right.
Sure. So yeah, that's the McCusker situation. And like I said, all he can do is just go back and crush AAA, and that might not even be enough. I mean, it's clear, and we've seen some versions of this in the past. And I'm not going to tell you that everybody who has 40 good games at AAA needs to be in the majors. Sure. That's definitely not true. I mean, Mickey Gasper's now putting together a longer stretch at AAA over multiple years, and I still think if you give Gasper a chance, he might be a good hitter. They're never going to know because they didn't give him a chance. And that's kind of where I'm at with McCusker. It's like you might have valid reasons for skepticism, but he can't prove it either way if you don't give him some opportunity. And if you weren't going to give him some opportunity, why call him up in the first place? So that's where I'm at with McCusker. But with that said, it's a small price to pay for getting Byron Buxton and Matt Wallner back in the lineup.
Yep.
It wasn't so long ago that there were many people who were skeptical of Matt Wallner.
You are correct.
For many of the same reasons.
Right.
He's a big, high strikeout guy. He's not a good defender. He's a blah, blah, blah. It's like, well, you had to give him an opportunity. That's more and more as we cover the Twins and just baseball in general, you learn that like such a huge percentage of players, major leaguers and even like AAA guys, so much just comes down to opportunity and what they do in that first little chance they get. Like if Carson McCusker gets 2 starts and he homers in both of them,
right, yeah.
It's maybe a different story. Now that's a crazy onus to put on someone to do that. Right, yeah. But that's the reality. If Mickey Gasper,
that just so clear, that's kind of what's happened to Cody Clemens.
Exactly right.
Literally 3-4 weeks ago, we were talking about roster moves, and we thought the odd guy out. I think this was while I was in Philadelphia, so it was in the month of May, and we were like, probably the one who's closest to, after. I think it was after Mickey Gasper goes sent down. Who's next? Probably Cody Clemens.
Of course. He's a 29-year-old career journeyman who had basically been claimed off waivers. He was the last one claimed, and they weren't even playing him really much, even though they were.
That's right. Bride was getting the time.
Right. I mean, and that's a great example is like he ended up with some, 30 at-bat opportunity.
Right.
And he was great for those 30 at-bats,
right.
which gets you another 30 at-bats. And he's been great in those too. And now he's got something of a foothold. And it's not necessarily because he's any better than he used to be or any better than McCusker or Gasper. It's just he got a little chance and he did something with it. And it can be a coin flip. I'm not saying he didn't perform well. He did. No, but I just mean go back and look at Cody Clemens' previous 3 or 4 years in the majors, which were identical. He would get these little opportunities with the Tigers or the Phillies, and he wouldn't do anything with them. Right. And then that would be it. Well, he did something with this opportunity. My thing is you got to at least give some opportunity for this. But again, I'm not even that big of a Carson McCusker guy, really. But yeah, just I don't know. It felt weird to me. Before we get into, we were going to pick our 1/3 season MVPs.
Okay.
First of all, they're now 1 game past the 1/3 mark, but they're 30-25, 88 win pace. Like I said, they started 7-15, which is a 52 win pace. They've been an MLB best 23-10 since then, which is a 113 win pace. Second place in the AL Central. They're I think either leading or tied for the first wild card. We kind of went over this more in depth on the Patreon, so we won't have to. But the things we've learned about this team is the pitching is legit, and there are big, big questions about the offense. Now, hopefully, once they get Wallner and Buxton back and Correa, if he keeps rolling, that will answer some questions about the offense, hopefully. They are now 26-3 when scoring at least 4 runs. Right. Which tells you the recipe.
Yeah. It tells you how good that pitching staff has been.
Yeah. Just give me...
And how consistent that pitching staff has been.
Give me 4 runs.
Right.
5 runs. That's not asking a lot. That's basically average.
Yeah.
Or a little below average at 4. And the pitching, more often than not, way, way more often than not, can win the game for you.
Sure.
But that has been a bar that they've not been able to reach. I mean, they've only reached it in 29 out of the 55 games. Basically, half the time they haven't scored at least 4 runs. Right. And we can do the math on that. They are 4-22 when not scoring 4 runs.
Right.
Well, that's the whole season right there in a nutshell. And that's the next 2/3 of the season are going to be about, A, trying to maintain that level of consistent excellence from the pitching staff, which is going to be a challenge too. But B, can you be more than a 50-50 coin flip as an offense of scoring 4 runs or more per game? Because if you can get to the point where you're doing that 60% of the time instead of 50% of the time, right, then you can win 90-something games instead of 80-something games. And
exactly
it's not asking that much.
And that's a big effing difference.
Yes.
The important, I guess what's making this season so compelling in a lot of ways is that this team, I mean, beyond the fact that they seem to be either hot as fire or cold as ice, there's also just sort of the point that they are on the margin. They, along with I think maybe 8 other American League teams, are on the margins of being a postseason team or just missing the postseason. There's a lot of 500 teams in the American League right now. You don't have you don't have to be that good to be in the postseason. And if you're just a little less than that good, you're just not in the postseason. It's just such a bunched crowd right now. It sounds odd because I think Major League Baseball in some ways has never had less parity, but the American League this year looks like there's about 10 teams that I can't really tell.
Or bigger playoff pool.
Right. Yeah, well, that's part of it.
You've expanded it not so long ago from 4 teams in each league to 6 teams in each league.
You're right. That's a big part of it.
That's a lot.
That's right.
You can't. When there's 15-team leagues and you used to have 4 of them make the playoffs,
that's right.
and once upon a time you used to have even fewer than that, and now you're at 6, like that's 40% of the league. And the way baseball goes, the records are not as lopsided over the course of a season. Like NFL, you go 15-2. There's no version of that in baseball.
Right.
I mean, you see 110 win teams, but that's equivalent of 11-5 or 11-6 in football, and so. You're just going to be much more bunched together because the sample of games are larger, and a bad team versus a good team, the bad team is maybe still 30-something% to win, whereas in basketball or football or whatever, it's just not like that. And so you're going to get bunched together, and then when you lower the bar for getting into the playoffs, if there were 4 teams making the playoffs, the bar would probably be 90 wins or more.
Right, yeah, right.
If there are 6 teams making the playoffs, the bar is 85 wins or less. So... Yeah. I mean, that benefits the Twins a lot more often than it's going to hurt the Twins.
It'll also be interesting to see how many teams are clearly sellers at the trade deadline, given the. I mean, that we've seen that more and more throughout over the last 3-4 years. Ever since they've kind of expanded to 6, there's a lot less teams that are selling.
Right.
But I think there's going to be a lot. Unless things become much more stratified than they already are in the American League, I think we're going to end up with a lot of teams trying to decide
I think
the last week of July.
The norm now.
Yeah.
I mean, it's never.
I think you're right.
You've lowered the bar for playoffs, and I'm fine with that. But there's just the trade deadline occurs not even 2/3 of the way through the season.
Yeah.
The odds of separation when 85 wins can get into the playoffs, because even if you're slightly below 500, 85 wins are within reach.
Yeah, absolutely.
When there's 60-something games left in the season. And so you end up with, I feel like we've had this conversation basically every year, which is 3 years since they changed the playoffs and expanded the playoff field. We've had the conversation every year, and I don't really envision that ever being different. I mean, once in a while there might be some wacky season where it's a little different, but there's just going to be so many more teams on the margins of the playoffs. And if anything, we're going to see what we've seen in the past, like the Rays did it last year, where they're like 2 games out of the last wild card, and they just go, you know what, we're just going to sell anyway.
I mean, that to me is one of the more interesting aspects of that, which is that you've got all these teams that are kind of on the margins. They're at 500 or they're a little below 500. They're taking a look at whether or not they can make a run. And you can take a look at 2 teams with the exact same record and say, when one team says, yeah, I don't think we've got it this year, and one team says, yeah, we're absolutely going for it this year. And what are the factors that make that? A lot of it, I think, has to do with sort of preseason expectations.
Well, it also, a team like the Rays knows that the worst thing the Rays could do, because they always have to churn talent,
right?
Because they can't keep guys. So they always have to be trading veterans for young talent. The worst thing they can do is hold on to their guys. We got another urination going on here, John?
I think you might want to take Rosa out here. She's nosing around over there.
Oh, false alarm on the urination. John, John's going now. Oh, this is like a bonus household type of. Oh no, Chrissy's going now. Oh no. But yeah, it depends on sort of how the team builds. The worst thing a team like the Rays can do is hold on to their guys, or even lightly buy. Right. And then miss the playoffs because then they've missed an entire year of trying to churn talent, basically, where there are other teams who are committed to basically pushing forward every season. Yeah. The Twins, I would say, have generally been in the try to win category, but the problem, and we'll talk about maybe the new update on the sale front, the problem is with the Twins, it certainly looks like they're going to be in position to not sell. Then it's a question of stand pat or buy, which has been the question the last 2 years, and they've basically stood pat at the deadline. the question then is like, is there a disconnect between what the front office would like to do with this team,
Yes.
which is probably add a bat, probably add who knows what,
Right.
or maybe trade a couple of guys for something, maybe switch up the core a little
Sure.
bit. You have guys like Julian and Miranda and Lewis and guys like that who potentially could be appealing to other teams and maybe have changed the way the Twins view them. But then the thing is like, do they have any money to spend?
Right.
And if they don't have any money to spend, and we'll give an update here on the sale thing, I guess, in a minute, but and this is a long way out. They got to keep winning. They got to keep being above average and all that. But that's another factor. Is like we've seen 2 years in a row where the Twins are certainly not sellers and probably should be at minimum kind of light buyers,
Right. Yep.
if not heavier
Heavy
buyers.
buyers, yep.
And what did they get? They got Trevor Richards
that's
or whatever.
what interests me about the factors that go into this is that it's not just results based, right? It is also perception based. It is also where you are in your competitive window based. It is also payroll based. It is also just sort of a haves versus have-nots based. As to you've got it's riskier to go for it if you are a have-not than if you are a have. So it'd be interesting to see how that plays out.
Before we talk about some other stuff, including the sale, we'll give you a little quick update on some reports on that. But let's talk about our last couple sponsors. One is Hims. If you were like both co-hosts of this show and your hair used to be a lot better than it is now, I'll just put it that way.
That's right.
You could go to Hims and they will provide you with convenient access to a wide range of hair loss treatments that work, all from the comfort of your couch. Doctor-trusted opinions, clinically proven ingredients like finasteride and minoxidil that regrow hair in as little as 3 to 6 months. You basically choose what you like, chewable, oral spray, serums, whatever seems like a good fit for you. Super simple, 100% online. They send it right to you, and it's not like in a flashing neon box that said this guy lost his hair. They'll send it so no one knows
Although
what it is.
some people might be noticing that anyway.
Sure. You just do a few questions.
That's it.
And a medical provider can determine what treatment is right for you. Can be sent directly to you for free. No insurance is needed. All that stuff. And here's how you can do your free online visit to determine which is the best course of action. Go to hims.com/Gleeman. That's HIMS. Hims.com/Gleeman for your personalized hair loss treatment options. Hims.com/Gleeman. I'll let John read this.
The disclaimer, results vary. Based on studies of topical and oral minoxidil and finasteride, prescription products require an online consultation with a healthcare provider who will determine if a prescription is appropriate. Restrictions apply. See website for full details and important safety information.
Our last sponsor is always good timing ahead of what is now Father's Day is the next holiday.
Correct.
Storyworth, here's how it works. You sign up for Storyworth kind of on behalf as a gift to mother, father, sister, brother, whoever it is.
Right.
In this case, perfect for Father's Day. They will kind of reach out to them, and what will happen is, as part of the process, they will get like a weekly prompt, like a question, like, what was your first job? Or, what was your first memory of this? Or what was your favorite pet? Or something like that.
And by the way, you get to sort of review those prompts. You get to review those prompts. They're not just, and in fact, you can even customize those prompts. Yes. Like, for instance,
who was your favorite son, John or Jeff Bonus?
I was thinking one of the things that I included in mine way back when was, as we had our dog Charlotte, was, hey, I was pretty young when we got our first dog. What made you guys get me a dog?
Yes, you can customize it. They'll, first of all, for a lot of, let's say, fathers out there, getting a question every week might be kind of fun for them.
Yeah, right.
And the end goal is at the end of the year, you can get like a physical book made out of all their answers, and it becomes almost like an autobiography of either them or the family itself. And then guess what? You've put all these memories into writing for their grandkids or future generations or whatever. So it's a perfect Father's Day gift that can actually be benefiting the entire family.
And on top of that it also can be a great last-minute Father's Day gift.
Yes, because there's no physical thing until the end. So you could sign up the morning of Father's Day. They'll get the email and they'll go, "Oh, how lovely!"
When you're panicking, go back and listen to this thing and get the promo code. So here's what you're going to do: you're going to give the dads in your life a unique, heartfelt gift you'll all cherish for years. Storyworth. Right now, save $10 during their Father's Day sale when you go to storyworth.com/Gleeman. That's storyworth.com/Gleeman to save $10 on your order.
Okay. So I guess the sale update or lack of sale update, Phil Miller wrote about it in the Star Trib. and Dan Hayes wrote about it in The Athletic.
Right.
Basically, I would say that Phil's major points were that the poll ads are talking to multiple parties who are interested, and that they have several of those have flown to the Twin Cities.
Several interested parties have flown to the Twin Cities
to tour Target Field, tour the behind the scenes, look at the books, talk to people about it.
It's not totally clear, like the level of these people or how serious they are of these people. Like, are they majority? Are they the main person, or are they minority?
They're doing due diligence for a potential purchase. He also wrote that the feeling is that this is closer to the end than the beginning.
Yes, that was one of the quotes. The source.
We're what are we, 8 months into this thing?
7 months.
7 months in.
Yeah.
So I hope so.
That puts us by the end of 2025. We're at the halfway mark.
So, I mean, that's better than the alternative. We're just getting started.
That's right.
But, the cliche you'd want to hear is we're at the, 1 yard line, not we're at the 51 yard line.
Correct. We're in the home stretch.
I know there isn't a 51
that?
yard.
That's right.
We're at the 49 on the other side of the field.
That's right.
And then Dan's report had similar stuff, but the takeaway that was a little different, he focused more on the idea that the poll ads are still wanting more than 1.5 billion, probably 1.7 billion, which he reported a couple months ago even, and that there's some, like, outside of the Twins, there's some level of skepticism in their ability to get that price.
Right.
And we've talked a lot about that.
Or that price is worth that price. Right. And that the owner or the buyers that they are taking a look at certainly have concerns, and they are certainly valid concerns. Among those valid concerns are the potential expiration of the CBA at the end of 2026 and what that means, because both sides seem to be doing a lot of sword rattling about that. Also the Twins TV deal, which is expired, that they're trying to work through, et cetera. So. Yeah, and the $425 million worth of debt that they reported.
Yeah, although I get that that's relevant from the poll ad standpoint, that doesn't mean anything from the buyer standpoint. Right. The buyer can say that's your problem. Right. Now, from the poll ad standpoint, it's clear, and Dan reported this a couple months ago, that the reason they rejected, reportedly, a $1.5 billion bid earlier in the season was that they felt like we can't accept 1.5 billion when we then have to pay down 425 million in debt, because then really it's 1.1 billion.
That's right.
Now, the world's tiniest violin plays for only getting 1.1 billion on a thing your grandfather paid 35 million for. But I mean, that's their logic, but that's irrelevant in some sense to a buyer, because the buyer said that's your fault. And but if the poll ads want to play chicken over that and want to insist on a higher 200 million more, let's say, in the purchase price, because then they have more walk away money, it's irrelevant from the buyer standpoint, but it's relevant for the purchase, because then they might just hold on to it at that stage. So the other thing Dan wrote was that there's no deadline. And I know there had been some reports that the Twins themselves were setting some deadline, 90 days or whatever. That may be true, but it's a self-imposed deadline. It has no meaning whatsoever. Sure. Like, it's one of these false deadlines.
There's a deadline we don't know about. I mean, if there's a deadline on the poll ad side for some other reason, we certainly don't know about it.
Right. I mean, if they are telling people, hey, we'd like to get this settled by X date, that's a deadline. Right. Except if no one on the buying side wants to settle it by that date, guess what? They're going to push back the deadline. I mean, it's meaningless at that stage. So that's kind of the update. I mean, it doesn't sound...
In general, the seller always wants an earlier deadline, and the buyer wants a later deadline. It's usually the time factor in a negotiation is on the buyer's side, not the seller's side.
I mean, I wouldn't describe either of these reports as particularly optimism creating, but I still think this is just going to come down to what we thought it was going to come down to 3 months ago or even 6 months ago, which is, are they going to accept a fair market offer, which I would say is about 1.5 billion, based on Forbes estimates, other Sportico's estimates, based on what they reportedly have turned down, which is somewhere around 1.5 billion. Or are they holding out for $200 to $300 million more than that? And if they do, and they get that, good for them. Great. Yeah. You can buy another yacht or whatever. But if they don't, that's the decision point. Is that at some point it's going to be clear either you can get that price or you can't. Yeah. And if, as I suspect, the answer is you can't,
then how motivated are they to sell?
Are you still going to sell the thing?
That's right.
And that's the deadline. I mean, there's no real deadline. That's that's the decision that's going to be made. So I don't know. I mean, obviously we've gotten to the point just in the calendar. You know, we were talking about the trade deadline and all that. You're too deep into the season now for that, unfortunately.
Sure.
I mean, the hope 6 months ago was, you know, probably not going to be done by opening day, but if we could mostly get it in place in April and May, then come July 30th, maybe the new owner says, here's another $10 million, go get a slugger or go get a whatever. Well, now, I mean, we're already in June, basically.
Well, to me, the trade deadline is right. It doesn't matter at all for the trade deadline. I mean, it matters in that we probably can't expect an influx of cash to assist in picking up players for the trade deadline. To me, at this point, given how late it is, the off season as well.
Right, that's what I'm saying.
The big question.
We've blown past the calendar for a trade deadline impact. I mean, clearly, it's not even clear they have actual offers yet. And in fact, both reports suggested there has not been any like actual offer made, that they're doing due diligence. Well, even if there had been an offer made this morning, you're less than 2 months from the trade deadline. Like, it's going to take more than 2 months from start to finish to actually get these people in place. So that's disappointing. Because I'd love to be wrong, but I've said this 2 years in a row. Like, I just have no faith in the Pohlads investing additional capital in this team, no matter what, at midseason. And we saw that last year. I mean, last year they were in prime position. They certainly had needs.
Yep.
You know, probably even more so, a wider range of needs then than they have now. Because they could have used pitching help, they could have used bullpen help, they could have used offensive help. Now, obviously, we're focused more on the offense. That could change. And even 2 years ago, they did nothing at the trade deadline. So, or relatively nothing at the trade deadline. So, you know, until proven otherwise, unfortunately, I feel like it's going to be the same type of viewpoint for the trade deadline. But I'd love to be wrong on that. Let's finish up on, since it is the 1/3 mark of the season.
Yep.
And we might have kind of the same list here, but like the 1/3 MVPs, and then maybe like, I don't know what a storyline for the next couple months is. I feel like we've talked about the lineup being kind of that storyline, but 1/3 MVPs. So I did a one quarter MVP, which is, you know, 3 weeks ago. Basically.
Okay.
And I thought at the time it was Buxton and Bader.
Okay.
To me. Now, since then, Buxton has gotten hurt and missed basically 2 weeks.
Right.
And Bader has been banged up and also just has seen his numbers go down a little bit.
Yep.
He's still been good, but it's not as clear.
He did not make my top 5.
And also, in the 3 weeks since then, Joe Ryan has continued to be fantastic.
Yeah, he did make my
And
top 5.
the other frontline trio, Pablo Lopez and Bailey Ober, have both continued to be very, very good. And so, as I was trying to come up with like a top 5, you know, MVP ballot at the 55 game mark, basically a third of the season, I think it kind of mirrors, at least in my mind, our discussion of the bigger picture roster or team performance, which is the pitching has carried them. The pitching, and especially the starting pitching, has just been fantastic. Other than the first week or the first 4 games of the season, it's been the best in the league. Yeah. And the hitting has been a real question mark, including, you know, Buxton has now been injured for 2 weeks. Bader has taken a step backward and been banged up. Your highest paid and most prominent player, Carlos Correa, missed time, wasn't good for the first month, and is now turning it together. He's not going to be at the forefront of any MVP discussion. So to me, I think Joe Ryan would be the easy choice right now.
So we're going to start at the top. We're going to start with number 1.
We don't need to do Letterman countdown.
Okay, all right. I also had Joe Ryan as number 1.
He's been the best guy in the best part of the team, which is the rotation. And he's really only had one not good start. He's had several very good starts where he goes 7, 2.5 ERA, great strikeout to walk numbers. You know, the last outing in Tampa was a great example. That was a tough environment to pitch. He was sweating, he was working, and he threw 6 innings of 1-run ball. That's been more often than not.
Even 2-3 starts ago, where it was clear he was absolutely struggling with his control, he managed to find some way to kind of be erratically effective in that start, you know, which is something that I didn't necessarily expect from him. Do you know what I mean? Like Joe Ryan can be really, really good, but when he's off, it feels like he lets that get to him a little bit. Yeah. And now seeing him get beyond that in a night where it was clear, I mean, I guess he was still getting over his sickness at that time.
He's been sick for like a month. Like, I don't know what his deal is, but like he's been limited health-wise.
Yeah, it's been, I also had him as my number 1 guy. I mean, I ended up kind of, you know, saying, here's my top guy in the bullpen. Here's my top guy in the lineup. Here's my top guy in the rotation. He's absolutely the top guy in the rotation, and I put him at number 1 overall over the other two.
Yeah.
So
after that, it's, a little more subjective, a little more coin flippy in my mind. But I would say, particularly, I might have answered this differently if Buxton had played the last 2 weeks.
Okay.
To me, the 2 and 3 are the other frontline starters.
Okay.
I mean, you can choose the order of Lopez, Ober, or Ober, Lopez. I mean, honestly, that's a true coin flip. But if you're looking at just...
Which one do you go first?
I guess I'd go Lopez and then Ober. But honestly, it's splitting hairs. It's identical. I'd put them in a tie for second.
In terms of the rotation, I would put them in that order. Right. Yep.
But and I know that's an unconventional top of an MVP ballot, and I wouldn't expect that to remain for a 162 game season. Yeah. But the reality is that the Twins starting pitching has been great. The bullpen has been very good, but it's very difficult in a third of a season to be the most valuable player as a reliever.
Right.
And the lineup has just not been good. And a lot of the biggest names in the lineup have not been good. And the ones who have been good have either slowed down recently or been injured recently. And so, like I said, 3 weeks ago, I thought Buxton and Bader were the guys. Although I had Joe Ryan third even then. Now they've each made 2 or 3, 4 more good starts for the most part. I mean, they all have an ERA in the mid 2s or low 3s. They all have good secondary numbers. They've all gone, pretty deep into games. They've all been consistent. Ober's been excellent except for the first start. Lopez really only had the one bad start. Now he missed a couple starts with the hamstring, but he's been very good since coming back. And then we talked about the consistency from Joe Ryan. So to me, you can tell the story of the team and the MVP ballot the same way, which is that the starting pitching has carried them. And I would put it as Ryan number 1, Lopez and Ober essentially tied for number 2, which makes them 2 and 3.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let me riff on that. First of all, I didn't put either of those 2 guys in my top 5, and it's not because I don't think they're worthy. They're absolutely worth consideration in the top 5. But my number 2, I put Buxton, which I think you're probably going to get to. But Buxton has been healthy up till the last week and a half, as you pointed out, and making a difference defensively, making differences offensively, and I think also in terms of like turning around this team when they were struggling to get hits, trying to score runs. I think his aggressiveness on the bases sort of demonstrated a different way for this team to play in terms of like, we need to start making things happen. He and oddly Keishel were sort of the driving force in terms of when this team was floundering, when this lineup was floundering in a 7-15 way, to be able to say, there's other ways we can try playing this game. We need to find a different identity for this team. And that doesn't mean completely changing the identity. It's not like the whole team is a bunch of, playing piranha ball right now. But just we need to add this piece of it, and I think that was a key factor in terms of that's why I put him number 2.
I mean, he's definitely been their best position player.
Right. Okay.
Like in terms of all-around value. I mean, he's been right up there as one of their best hitters or their best hitter. He's played, up until the concussion, a ton of games. And like you said, I mean, he's been very good in center field, and he's essentially played every day in center field. He didn't really have any DH time. He's been great on the bases, not only, I think, 8 for 8 on steals, but like you said, pushing the envelope, going first to third, going first to home on doubles, all that stuff. I mean, I think I had him 4th, but you can bump him up.
And my number 3 then was Duran. You know me, I'm a WPA guy. And I know that Duran, I think in general, the strength of this bullpen has been its depth more so than like any one single person. But Duran has been the best of what is already a very good deep bullpen. He has been the one reliable. He's been the most reliable of the pieces that they've had out there. And for a bullpen that has, been excellent, but also struggled in key portions, and he's occasionally blown things occasionally. I had to put him. I would be much more worried about this team. And I don't think they would be anywhere near where they are without Duran in there. I'm wondering if he even made your top 5. Or did you have anybody from the bullpen make your top 5? No. Okay.
I mean, I'm not going to give anybody for 23 innings or whatever. I mean, yeah, he's been very good. Although, I think, WPA wise, but we always have this argument with WPA. I mean, whoever pitches the ninth, if they're successful, is going to have a high WPA. I think he's been very good. I don't think he's really been used in a creative way like he has been in years past.
True.
And that's fine because, like you said, the depth of the bullpen makes that less of a need. But I also just think the dominance hasn't been quite as valuable because basically he's just closing games. And so it doesn't matter if you...
Yeah, but with this particular lineup, those games are often a lot of times are one game. I mean, WPA ain't lying in terms of it's comparing him to an average reliever that is taking over the thing.
So. But first of all, his WPA is not that spectacular, but it's good. It's on the best on the team. But right,
it's the best on the
team. He'd be right there with Danny Coulomb if Danny Coulomb hadn't missed the last couple of weeks.
Fair point.
I'm going to assume over the last month, Jax actually has the best WPA on the team because Jax started from such a big hole.
You're right.
But that's what I'm saying when I say like the creativity of usage. Jax has put out fires for people.
That's true.
But he was so bad for those 3 outings that it wiped away. But Jax is now on a positive WPA. So I have no problem with Duran there.
When we talked earlier in the episode about super hot and super cold, whether it was the team or the lineup or whatever. Jax has been a pretty good example of that too.
I wouldn't. You're going to have a very hard time convincing me that a reliever on any team in any circumstance, especially 1/3 of the way through the season, is one of the 3 or 4 most valuable players. But he's been great. I mean, I have no problem with that. I would still put Bader up there.
So you had Buxton as 4 then?
Yeah, Buxton 4, Bader 5. And then Cody Clemens. I mean, it's only 60 plate appearances. This is similar to the Duran from my point of view. Is like Duran. I have a hard time saying someone with that limited usage is more valuable than like a guy who's got 150 plate appearances and plays defense and all that. It's the same thing for Clemens, but I'm pretty sure Clemens leads the team in WPA. I mean, he's done it in 60 plate appearances.
I think he does from the lineup standpoint.
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
I think his defense has been more functional than positive.
Right. Yep.
But they've needed that functionality, so he gets credit for that too. And so I guess I would put him.
That's a good point. Is that the fact that given all the injuries that they had, the fact that he can play both infield and outfield, has been.
I don't think he's looked good anywhere really.
Right. Yeah, I mean, that's right.
When they tried him at first, he looked pretty bad.
Well,
he made a nice throw in right field,
game or two,
but only after botching the play off the wall. At second base, he looks. He's better than Julian, but not as good as Castro, let's say.
Right.
But he's got a 1100 OPS, and he's got 5 homers, and 4 of them have changed games.
Well, when he got hot is when this team caught fire as well. Like as much as I like to point to Buxton as somebody that kind of got them out of the slump, the person that ignited this thing and turned it from a good stretch of 2 weeks into we win 13 in a row now, and we're just a totally different team. Clemens was one of the primary contributors.
Yeah,
to
and
that.
This is not a real award, the 1/3 MVP, but it doesn't matter how you think the next 2/3 are going to go. In other words, I don't think 2 months from now, if we do the first half MVP, that Cody Clemens will be, prominently involved in that. Right. But it doesn't matter. All we're doing is we're stopping the record right now.
Right. Yeah.
Back in the day, kids, there used to be a thing called records.
Record scratch.
That's so funny. I never even had records. I'm too young for records, but we're stopping the record, and whatever happened.
You are young, Jesus.
I mean, we had a record player, but I never.
Sure, right.
I was a tape guy. Kids, tapes are a thing that. CDs are a thing. Oh wait. Yeah, I don't even know.
Yeah.
What do people listen to at this point? Streaming, I guess.
MP3s. Yeah.
Not even MP3s. Right. That's not a thing anybody knows.
You're right. It's just streamed Spotify stuff. You're right.
Yeah. God, we're old.
I know MP3s because I have to create them about this podcast all the time. Right.
But what's going to happen tomorrow or next month or August and September, I don't care about for this. So I'm only evaluating, where we're at now. Now, it would be interesting to try to predict 2 months from now what this MVP is going to look like. But I would say to me, those 6, which is Ryan, Lopez, Ober on the pitching side, Buxton, Bader, Clemens on the hitting side. You made the case for Duran, obviously, so we can include him as a 7.
I'm going to include another one in there. Ryan Jeffers, who has been, taking over. I mean, he's still not playing as much as I'd like to see him play at catcher, but he was getting but he didn't need to because there were spots at DH. And when you've got a guy who can catch and hit well enough to be your regular DH, even in what is a banged up lineup or something like that. I mean, that is exactly the kind of player that you need to be filling out, the middle of your lineup, the 4th, 5th, 6th. Now, in fact, he's actually been at the top of the lineup because this team has been so banged up. But that, again, speaks to how valuable he has been. So he was another one of the guys that I gave heavily consideration.
I mean, he's been very good. What I'll say is, on this team, any competent offense is valuable. However, just bigger picture, I don't know, he's got a 110 OPS plus or something as a DH isn't that valuable. And he hasn't really caught more than normal. Well, that happened for about 6 days. I know. And then they started.
But a 110 OPS plus from a catcher is very, very.
Right, but it's
valuable.
Not that. It's from a halftime catcher.
Yeah,
right. That's what I'm saying. Yeah. So I don't know. I would certainly Joe Ryan's the MVP. Anything after that is fine. I mean, that's the weird part about this. They've gotten, I would say, 4 all-star caliber performances. The 3 starting pitchers and Buxton. Now, relievers in the All-Star game are tricky.
Right.
They usually choose 2 relievers or something like that.
Yeah, and they often come from a team that doesn't have another good representative.
Now, Duran has a bunch of saves, and he's got a sub-2 ERA. And, he's certainly, as far as the reliever bar for an All-Star, he's been at that level. So maybe that's a 5th guy. But then the other ones we're talking about are like Bader, who's...
Right.
Kind of a 4th outfielder who's played more than that.
Right.
Jeffers, who's a half catcher, quasi DH, who's been good but not great. And then Cody Clemens, who's literally has 50 at bats.
Right. Yep.
Doesn't take away from that, but it's they haven't, because the guys that they thought were going to carry them in terms of bigger roles is obviously Correa.
Sure.
Who has played well of late, and he's certainly trending
I'm
in
really
an
optimistic, yeah, right.
But he's got a 75 OPS plus or something. He's been great defensively, I will say that.
Royce Lewis,
same thing. Right. The guys you would have predicted. I mean, we did this. We did the MVP draft, which if people are interested in that, we broke it down on the last podcast on Patreon. But a lot of the guys at the top, Wallner being another example. If Wallner would have just been healthy and played he'd be 2nd or 3rd on this list probably.
But
he's been out. So the level to which they've had to piece things together, especially in the lineup, obviously, has been crazy even for them, which brings us back to the big topic of Wallner and Buxton being back. And what does this thing, and that's what I want to see. I mean, we'll finish up here, but they need, as we go through who's been the first, 3rd MVP and we name these names, and then you think well, who do they need to step up? Well, they need Correa to keep trending in the right direction. We talked about Lewis is a huge question mark, good or bad. Guys like Castro, Brooks Lee, Larnick, all included in there. They need these guys to be average or better, not below average. And that's going to be the difference between, a good deep lineup that we saw 2 years ago in the second half when they called up Lewis and Wallner and Julian, and those guys provided a boost.
Right.
Maybe you get a Keishel back for the second half. Maybe someone like Emmanuel Rodriguez or whatever comes back. But they have guys who are already, Brooks Lee is no different than a call-up.
Yes.
It's just he's already in the majors. They need him to be an average performer. And then, if they get anything from Julian and Miranda, I've kind of given up hope on
your favorite guy, McCusker.
Or McCusker. I don't. And that'd be great. I just... that would be a good over-under. He's had 5 plate appearances, I think.
Okay, yeah.
Over-under 5 more plate appearances. 5.5.
I'll take over.
Over 5.5 more plate appearances? I hope you're right, but I don't know. I don't think they're going to go out of their way to do anything with him, unfortunately. I had one other... So, this is going to be a big stretch. They're in Seattle starting tonight. Then they go to...
And we get to watch those late-night games.
Yeah, I like those.
I like them on weekends.
Then they play the A's, not in Oakland, in West Sacramento.
Right.
And then come home, they face Toronto and Texas, I think, in the next homestand, I want to say. It's not a big stretch in terms of necessarily, high quality of competition. Those are all, 3 of those are decent teams, and the A's are the A's. Right. But it's a important stretch, I think, in terms of evaluating what you actually have offensively. And we'll end on this because we started on this, just, tied it into a nice bow at the end. But it's basically June 1st now.
Yeah.
And from June, I think first of all, they got to keep guys healthy.
Yes.
But if they can do that for even 3 or 4 weeks, which is a lot to ask for this team, I recognize, you at least have this window to evaluate. Like, is this a bad offense like we've seen? They've ranked, bottom third of the league in pretty much everything. Or is this an average offense that's been missing so many key parts?
Or had enough slow starts.
Right, that they've just been bad. And I certainly think they're better than 23rd. Are they better than 16th, 18th or something? That's kind of what
it's hard to argue that right now.
Right. That's what remains.
Now, part of that is probably colored by how they finished last year. The last 6-7 weeks last year has also got me.
Exactly.
I mean, which is what also colored our view of the first 3-4 weeks of this season. I think that's fair. I don't think you have to let that go.
How can you view it any other way? First of all, Miranda and Julian are at AAA.
Right.
Royce Lewis is hitting 135.
Right.
I mean, a lot of these pieces that you were expecting to do things just haven't done things, and some of them aren't even with the team.
Right.
But there's no reason that a lineup that has Wallner, Correa, Buxton, Royce Lewis, Ryan Jeffers, Trevor Larnach, et cetera, there's no reason that can't be an average-ish lineup.
Yeah, right.
I mean, there really isn't. And now it hasn't been for almost 100 games now, dating back to the middle of August of last season. Yeah. And at some point, you just need to sort of reevaluate individually or collectively what you have. But I do think it's a little tricky to do that when you haven't seen the whole. You've been going to the play and you haven't seen the whole cast.
Yeah,
you've been seeing the understudies a lot of the time, and you can come away from it and go, "It wasn't that good of a play," and most of the key actors were in there, but it wasn't that good. Or you can go away and say, "That wasn't that good of a play," but also 2 of the 4 main roles were played by an understudy. I don't want to determine if I like this play or not until I see the main actors.
And like you said, the other thing about it is that you have to keep the foundation while you're trying to get a sense for what the lineup can be. You have to keep the foundation of this team intact and effective, which is the starting rotation and the bullpen.
Right. Well, that's
all of that. All of that is interesting to watch. But don't take for granted that the starting rotation and bullpen are going to be as absolutely excellent as they have been.
Well, and I think that's a really easy trap to fall into that we are guilty of over the years too, is when something's going bad and something's going really good. It's very easy to say, hey, if the thing that's going bad improves a little, they'll be in good shape.
If it regresses to the mean, we're going to be great.
Right. But if the thing that's going really well regresses also, then you're kind of right back where you started. And so, I think especially with starting pitching, health is always such a big question mark. Durability, but I do think, they have Festa, who's pitching well now again at AAA.
Yeah, that's good news.
They have Simeon Woods Richardson, who's on track now at AAA. So the depth is there, even if they were to lose a starter or two. But then the other part, the lineup, it's funny because you go, well, they're getting Buxton back, they're getting Wallner back. Maybe they can get Lewis on track. That's all good. But the flip side is, what if Cody Clemens stops hitting like Roy Hobbs? Right. That's going to take away whatever gains you make by Wallner. And that's why I'm more...
What if Chris Paddock ends up not being as effective as he has been for the last month?
He'll just get dumped from the rotation. I'm talking more about the offense. But that's an example too. Right. Which is why I think, yes, the headline here is Buxton and Wallner coming back, and that is huge. But they need their 6th through 11th guy on the hitting hierarchy. And now I'll include Clemens in that mix too.
Yeah.
But, Castro and Brooks Lee and Larnach and Jeffers and I'll say Royce Lewis and, you can probably think of a different name you want to throw in there. They need those guys to be the average group that they thought instead of the...
Meet expectations.
Yeah, and it's not even that, we need all these guys to hit 290 with power. Right. It's we need Larnach to be a 115 OPS plus guy, not a 98 OPS plus guy. Right. We need Royce Lewis not to hit 140. That's pretty simple.
We need him to be not a 15 OPS
we
guy.
need Royce Lewis and Willie Castro to not hit like utility men. You need them to hit like starting players because at least one of them is going to be starting pretty much every game. Right. And so, I really think this is going to be a huge stretch. And honestly, starting it in Seattle is a real tough place to hit.
Yep.
I think West Sacramento's playing like a good place to hit.
I think that'd be sure.
So maybe that wipes out. But I'm very curious what this lineup looks like just in terms of the batting order. Because it's one thing to have Cody Clemens batting 4th and Ty France batting third and Ryan Jeffers leading off, when you look and you go, what other options are there? Well, now they're going to have options.
Yeah.
They're going to have as many options as they ever had. In other words, these are the options that they chose to have.
Yep, that's right.
And so I'm curious what the lineup looks like. And then also, can they find some level of consistency scoring 4 or 5 runs most games? I don't need 12-run outbursts. It's these 0, 1, and 2 runs where at the end of the game, you look up and you go, they just wasted a real good. This is a winning pitching effort. And if you waste enough of those, it's going to catch up to you. And that's what I need to see from this lineup. And it'll just be fun. I mean having Buxton back is always fun. And having Wallner, I think people forget how good he's been over the last 2.5 years, basically.
I also just want to call out 2 weeks ago, we were taking a look at what was ahead for the Twins. We knew that Correa was probably going on the concussion IL. We knew that Buxton was probably going on concussion IL. We had Wallner still out. We didn't even know when Wallner would be back or that he was planning on jumping in with the Saints right away. And they were heading into Milwaukee. They were on a huge win streak, but we were like, I don't know how long that's going to last. Well, I mean, they did manage to do what we hoped that they would do. They treaded water for 2 weeks. They took 2 out of 3 from Milwaukee. They split with Cleveland. They took 2 out of 3 from Kansas City. They took 2 out of, I mean, they've been good enough. Or they took 1 out of 3 from Tampa Bay. They ended up with, I think, overall slightly positive record over that 6-5 record or something over that stretch. And that's as much as I was really hoping that they would do, given the state of their lineup. Once you start seeing, Brooks Lee batting third in your lineup on a regular basis, things are going to be a little bit iffy. So, and now they've got Correa back. They've had Correa back, and he looks better. And we're getting Buxton back. We're getting Wallner back. It does feel like there's some reason for optimism.
Now you can judge the play by how good it is, because everyone on the playbill is actually acting in the performance, and that can be scary because if they don't hit now, then you got some decisions to make coming up on the trade deadline. But I mean, think of it. We talk so much about injuries, and I'm not saying they're fully healthy, obviously, but top 10 or 11 hitters as of tonight, we think are going to be back. Everyone in the rotation is healthy.
Right. Yep.
Everyone in the bullpen is basically healthy. I mean, Michael Tonkin's out and Danny Coulombe's out, and Coulombe's been a big factor, but this is about as healthy as you're going to get. What do they look like? A fully functional roster. This is the roster they wanted to put out there. And also, I guess the bigger thing is, how long will they be healthy? Like, will it be 3 games, 5 games until someone goes down? But in the meantime, you at least get to evaluate the team that Derek Falvey meant to put on the field.
Yep.
Good or bad. All right. We'll be back Monday on the Patreon side, Patreon, patreon.com.
The Seattle series and
/Gleeman.
Giving initial impressions of the return, hopefully, of some big bats.
All right, that's it.
Let's thank to our sponsors, Hims and also Storyworth, but then a special thank you to our presenting sponsor, Black Stack Brewing. So they're now being distributed to all of Greater Minnesota. Stop by your favorite liquor store or the Black Stack Tap Room to grab your favorite brew or try something new. You can check out their Where to Buy page on their website to find out where you can buy their beer and THC products near you.
I am now going to go pee on your kitchen floor just to make your dog feel less self-conscious. Like, no big deal. We all do it.
Good idea, yeah.
Bye.
Bye. Gleeman